The people of Europe are sending a very clear message to the out-of-touch bureaucrats in Brussels pushing EVs and net zero. And that message is, we don't want them! None of this will be a surprise to regular viewers because this has been happening since at least the beginning of this year, when the famous 3 Fs all evaporated. The hipster fanboy market was saturated with Teslas, the fleets were full of EVs thanks to generous government subsidies, and freebies for the public were withdrawn. That, combined with the fact that EVs are, for most people, inconvenient, impractical, and an absolute pain to live with, means that the market has crashed spectacularly and will no doubt continue to do so until the EU does something about it. In this video, we'll take a look at growing calls for urgent action in Europe to save the auto industry, how VW might be about to cut 30,000 jobs, and how German EV sales dropped a staggering 70% in August. The question is, how long can this continue? Welcome back to MGUY, British engineer and lawyer, now Sydney-based YouTuber. Be sure to follow me on the usual socials for more content, links in the description, and please make sure you're subscribed and have enabled all notifications so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you'd like to support this channel, think about buying me a coffee. Link in the description, or you can scan the QR code right there. The EV madness is already starting to hit the European car industry hard, with sales down across the board. VW, which was only in the news a couple of weeks ago as having only a year or two to turn itself around and avoid disaster, is on the verge of massive job cuts to save costs. VW considers cutting 30,000 jobs. VW is considering axing as many as 30,000 jobs as it scrambles to save billions of euros amid a slowdown in the car market, German media has reported. The carmaker recently announced it could close some of its German factories for the first time in history as it struggles to reinvent itself for the electric era. Analysts at Jefferies said VW is considering closing 2 to 3 facilities, with as many as 5 German sites under threat, putting 15,000 jobs at risk. Those job losses are feared to have doubled to 30,000, according to Manager magazine, a leading German business publication. A VW spokesman said, "We do not confirm the figure. One thing is clear, Volkswagen has to reduce its costs at its German sites." And the sales figures for August in Germany and other parts of Europe will have sent shivers through the VW board, prompting calls to the European Union from Industry Association to put the brakes on the EV madness, calls which will no doubt fall on deaf ears. Germany suffers spectacular 70% drop in electric car sales. European car makers call for delay in emissions restrictions as EV demand falters. Germany has suffered a spectacular drop in electric car sales as the European Union faces growing calls to delay its net zero vehicle targets. The European Automobile Manufacturers Association, ACEA, said sales of new battery-powered electric vehicles, EVs, in Germany plunged by nearly 70% to 27,024 in August. In France, the EU's second largest market for battery electric vehicles behind Germany, deliveries fell by 33% to 13,143. ACEA said the spectacular drop in both countries meant that only 92,627 battery electric vehicles were registered across Europe last month, a fall of 43.9% compared to a year earlier. This drove a wider 18% drop in new car sales across the EU. The collapse in EV sales comes amid concerns about their range, high prices and the lack of charging infrastructure across the EU. Felipe Munoz, a global automotive analyst at Jato Dynamics, said, "The reality is that whether you look at business or private, electric vehicles do not convince yet." There are concerns about demand for EVs among British drivers too. Separate data showed that the growth rate of EV sales in the UK had dramatically slowed. Some 213,500 EVs were sold in the first 8 months of 2024, up by 10.5% compared to the previous year. That compared to annual growth of 40.5% over the same period in 2023, according to the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, SMMT. Mike Hawes, head of the SMMT, said earlier this month, encouraging a mass market shift to EVs remains a challenge and urgent action must be taken to help buyers overcome affordability issues and concerns about charge point provision. Just more taxpayer money, in other words, to subsidise EVs so that wealthy, environmentally conscious people can buy them. That is not the answer. But all of this is driven by the net zero ideology of Brussels and new rules for emissions due in 2025. The new rules require all new European cars to produce no more than 93.6 grams of CO2 per kilometre. Brands will be fined €95 for each gram of CO2 per kilometre over the limit, multiplied by the number of cars sold. The ACEA said the continual downward trajectory of EV sales in the bloc meant manufacturers would be at risk of multi-billion euro fines and said the new rules needed a rethink. It warned that demand for EVs was still well below the level needed for the EU's new vehicle emission rules to work effectively. We are missing crucial conditions to reach the necessary boost in production and adoption of zero-emission vehicles. Charging and hydrogen refilling infrastructure, as well as a competitive manufacturing environment, affordable green energy, purchase and tax incentives, and a secure supply of raw materials, hydrogen and batteries, the ACEA said. Nope, that's not the right approach either. They've asked the right question but have completely failed to provide the sensible answer, which is obvious, of course. Stop the EV madness right now. As I've said many times in the past, EVs may have a very limited use case for a small number of people, but they are not the one-size-fits-all replacement for petrol and diesel cars. The public can see this perfectly clearly. It's painfully obvious. But to the ideologues in Europe and elsewhere, blinded as they are by zealotry of net zero, they literally cannot see it. What is going to be fascinating to watch over the next few months is how long it will take for the penny to drop. I fear it may be longer than many auto manufacturers can last.